Hello world, this is BFNations and I'm Anwar. Today I have some exciting stuff to share, the long anticipated results of the Battlefield survey, which is our attempt to get a better understanding of what our members and the broader community as a whole thinks about the current game and what their hopes are for the future of Battlefield. A total of 1,830 Battlefield fans chose to participate in a relatively long survey. This wasn't 3 questions in a drop-down menu, but a long-form survey which covered a lot of ground, so we're quite blown away, actually, by how many of you took the time to answer it. Let me just quickly explain how this survey was conducted. What we first did was to source some different opinions about Battlefield 1 from sources like Reddit, the Battlefield forums, various Discord servers, and bigger platforms like Facebook and Twitter. We then compiled some of the most commonly expressed opinions or statements that we read, cleaned up the language, and created a survey at BFNations.com where participants could rate each opinion on a scale ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Participants could also add custom feedback, both criticism and praise, as well as share their hopes for the next version of Battlefield. Finally, before we get into the good stuff, I have 2 things to mention. One, we're not data scientists, and while we're proud of what we achieved here, it can't be relied on as a perfect representation of reality. There's a ton of ways we could improve this concept in the future. Second, after reading through hundreds of lines of feedback on the game, it's pretty obvious that Battlefield has a passionate following of players that really like the game. This narrative sometimes gets lost when browsing through social media streams and a lot of misdirected anger. There's clearly ways that the game can develop, but criticism should be constructive, and we also can't lose sight of what's really good about the game. Now, to the results. 1. The graphics and dynamic environments in BF1 are fantastic. This, together with world-class audio, makes for a really immersive experience playing the game. Out of the 20 questions posed in our survey, this one got the most one-sided response by far. More than 75% of participants strongly agree with the statement. Regardless of every other aspect of the game, the graphics, the audio, and the environments is something that DICE have truly mastered. So good job, DICE. 2. The single-player campaigns, or war stories, were well stringed together, diverse in their content, and enjoyable to play. BF1 was the first Battlefield game to feature single-player campaigns from the unique perspective of individual protagonists. Overall, participants agreed that War Stories was a success, while 30% declared themselves neutral. Another new feature for this installment of Battlefield was the Operations mode. 3. The new Operations mode is one of the most exciting game modes released for the BF series, with its massive all-out war, clear lines, and attack-defend roles for each team. Again, a rather one-sided response from our participants. Almost 50% of participants strongly agree that Operations was great, with 28% agreeing. It seems like DICE really hit the nail on the head with this one, a game mode that really feels like it captures the essence of Battlefield. 4. The way that points are distributed to encourage objective-based gameplay is really good. Contributions like resupplies, revives and heals are rewarded in a very accurate way, and the scoreboard, generally speaking, feels justified at the end of a game. That's a pretty long statement, but the core question here is, are points rewarded in a fair way? When factoring in both strong agreements and agreements, almost 80% of participants seem to think they are. 5. The way in which experience points are accumulated, players level up, and unlocks are made available is good and well balanced. What's being referred to here is of course the leveling up and unlocks of new weapons in the game. Unlike the previous statement, participants seem to deviate somewhat in what they felt here. While a majority of participants agreed that the balance here is good, many also remained neutral or disagreed. When looking at the custom feedback which was sent to us, some players seemed to feel that the progression system was better in BF4, where players could focus on more continuous improvements and new attachments, while in BF1 there are fewer ways of spending your war bonds to make step-by-step improvements. 6. The choice of a World War I setting for the game was brave and well received. The historical references, authentic storyline and attention to detail was fantastic. Another slam dunk. As Lars Gustafsson, creative director at DICE Stockholm, said in our interview with him back in January, DICE had wanted to do this for a long time, so we're glad it finally happened. Almost 90% of participants either agree or strongly agree with the statement. 7. Teams don't get balanced efficiently, which regularly leads to unbalanced public matches with one side clearly having the upper hand. So, since releasing this survey, DICE released a patch which intended to address this issue. However, team balance still remains a concern among many players as evident on the forums. A majority agree that this is a problem worth looking closer at, and the issue has been around for quite some time now, so we're not quite sure what the blocker is here. It's quite demoralizing to play matches, in operations for instance, where your team is either crushing the opposition so hard that you start killing them on spawn, or losing so bad that pushing becomes pointless and you're stuck in your base hiding under a rock for the remainder of the round. 8. The skill threshold required to snipe effectively is too low. Snipers are an increasing element of nuisance in BF1, not least thanks to the vast unobstructed maps and decreased bullet drop. This one was controversial. Although most replied that they agree with the statement, almost the same amount felt either neutral about it or disagreed. In the custom feedback we received, many mentioned that the sweet spot mechanic was flawed, since players don't need to be hit on the head to get a one-shot kill. Instead, several rifles can one-shot, or produce 100 damage, by hitting the upper body or the torso of the enemy. 9. Grenade spam and explosive spam are too prevalent in all modes. Grenades, improvised grenades, impact grenades, AT grenades, crossbow launchers, rifle grenades, AT rocket, limpet charges, dynamite, tripwires and mortars. There's loads of explosives in Battlefield 1. While explosives aren't a problem per se, it can get overwhelming at times. Much like with the previous questions, the replies are somewhat divided here, although most agree that explosive spam is an issue. 10. Planes are too often used to clear off infantry rather than participate in dogfights. This encourages a lot of non-PTO gameplay and unconstructive use of the planes available to a team. Many players wrote us that they feel that planes are a somewhat disconnected part of the gameplay. Instead of trying to actively combat the enemy planes or support their teammates on the ground, a majority of pilots use planes to only farm kills. In earlier installments of Battlefield, planes were used more as a utility for the team rather than non-stop killing machines. Again, there's some controversy here, but all in all, participants seem to agree. 11. More cover would help encourage tighter and more intense close quarters fighting, as well as decrease sniper efficiency. As already mentioned, the maps on Battlefield 1 are well suited for sniping due to their open nature. Many players would like to see a shift to more high-paced close quarters combat. More walled-off areas and verticality would help achieve this. 12. Joining friends from within the game has been buggy since the game release. Ever since the release of Battlefield 1, many players have struggled when trying to join their friends who are playing. Sometimes joining your friend simply fails and you're met with an error screen, while at other times your friend never shows up as being in the game in the first place. More than 60% of survey participants agree that this is an issue. 13. Behemoths and elite classes don't really add much value to the gameplay experience, but rather serve to skew the balance. Many have expressed their concerns over behemoths and elite classes in the game. For one, it seems quite common that players will simply hijack a behemoth and try to farm kills rather than put it to any constructive use for the team, carrying with it 6 players who could instead be capping an objective. This one went down to the wire, and the community seems quite divided. A lot of players seem to genuinely appreciate the introduction of behemoths and elite classes, while others don't. 14. Initial RSP support was virtually non-existent and is still lacking. Several key features, such as setting multiple admins or resetting the server at will, are still missing. The game took steps back in development here in comparison to previous titles. Even Battlefield 1942, which was released a long time ago, had deeper and more extensive server admin options than BF1 does today. Aside from mere quality of life features, such as being able to post alerts and a custom server banner, one big issue here is the inability to set more than one admin for the RSP server. In fact, this has led to clans and organizations having to create separate shared XBL, PSN and Origin accounts simply in order to have shared control over a server. We press this issue extra hard because it's something that we, BFNations, experienced ourselves during our early days in trying to set up competitive matches. 48% of our participants declare themselves neutral, likely because they simply do not use the RSP feature, while approximately 50% agreed or strongly agreed with the statement. 15. Use of non-standard peripherals is a problem on consoles, such as mouse and keyboard emulators and USB adapters. Some percentage of players turn to these devices to attain an unfair advantage, both on public servers and in online competitive matches. While this isn't a problem specific to Battlefield, it's nonetheless an issue to overcome. This issue is perhaps most prevalent among competitive Battlefield players, where the stakes are higher and where slight differences in advantage have a bigger impact on outcomes. Almost 50% of participants responded neutrally, while about 42% agreed or strongly agreed that this is a problem worth looking into. 16. When matchmaking for public games, there should be a stronger correlation between player skills and ending up on the same server together. This would help make the game more fun for all involved and increase the shelf life of the game for players of all levels. The response here was very one-sided. More than 70% of participants agree or strongly agree with the statement, with 20% remaining neutral. Although this feels like a non-brainer, which would benefit the game in every aspect, there's likely some technical challenges to make this happen. It also relies heavily on a large enough player base to match players based on skill. 17. The game currently has too many game modes. In addition, it's received a total of 4 DLCs, which divides the existing player base even further. This, in consequence, makes it harder to find matches, balance teams, and matchmake efficiently. It would be better to focus on creating less yet more distinct game modes, maps, and downloadable content. No need to elaborate on this really. 62% agree or strongly agree, with 22% in opposition. 18. The gunplay or the shooting mechanics feel unrewarding and inconsistent at times, due to awkward movement, suppression and bugs. A really close tie on this one. On the one hand, we've seen a lot of feedback reporting issues with hit registration, the bullet spread system and the effects of suppression. At the same time, Battlefield players are a picky bunch. Battlefield clearly outperforms games like Call of Duty on this note, and the mere fact that the game can track the whereabouts of hundreds of thousands of projectiles at any given time is pretty impressive. All in all, this is probably a good area for EA DICE to focus in on more for the next Battlefield game, with the increased focus on the competitive gaming with incursions, where Battlefield will likely be held up against games like CSGO and Rainbow Six Siege. 19. Despite largely removing the bug where a player could spawn on a dead teammate, spawns still don't feel robust. Spawning sometimes puts you right in front or behind of an enemy, and maybe a radius is required here preventing this from happening. In almost every Battlefield game, players have had the ability to spawn on a squad mate or a squad leader. The way in which this is achieved can be kinda jerky at times. Sometimes you spawn on a squad mate who's taking fire, sometimes you spawn on a squad mate who just died. Sometimes you spawn directly behind or in front of an enemy soldier. A whopping 75% of participants either agree or strongly agree that this is an issue. Another one to keep in the back of our minds ahead of the next game. 20. While the user interface visually looks great, the general responsiveness of everything from making a selection to loading content is too slow. Players sometimes encounter really slow loading screens when attempting to open battle packs or when entering the customized soldier screen through the main menu. Many feel that navigating through the menus tends to feel quite unresponsive. Only 15% disagree with this statement, while 28% remain neutral. Here's to a Battlefield 2018 with fast-flowing and fast-loading menus. So, DICE has managed to cover a lot of different eras with Battlefield through the years, while many potential ones remain unvisited. We wanted to know which setting you were interested in seeing on the table next. Just over 50% of survey participants agree that DICE should transition into the Second World War with the next iteration of the Battlefield franchise. Around 16% want to see the Vietnam War portrayed again, while 15% are longing for the franchise to return to modern warfare. Going way back in time, pre-World War I, or way ahead into the future, futuristic warfare was almost tied with 3.6% and 3.4% respectively. So in our survey, we also asked if you would prefer map design that lean more towards infantry focus, vehicle focus, or a balanced mix of both. Since this is Battlefield, we predicted the outcome of this one. About 75% want a mix of both, while almost 21% feel that the franchise needs more close quarters combat and infantry warfare. When asking about weapons customization, it seems most of you preferred full weapons customization found in games like BF3 and BF4 rather than the limited variant version in BF1. 72% agreed on the full customization, while 26% likes the current state of it, and the remaining 2% want no customization at all? Why? So what about single player versus multiplayer then? 42% enjoy a balanced mix of both multiplayer and single player, while the dominating 56% of you only care about the multiplayer experience. 1.1% of you only care about the single player experience. You guys gotta try out multiplayer. Lastly, we wanted to know what your hopes were in terms of a casual versus a competitive focus in the next Battlefield game. 57% of you said that you want a balanced mix of both competitive and casual, while 33% want that extra push for a competitive gameplay experience. So that's it for our survey results. Now, we did mention we would pick 2 random winners for a BFN mystery box, so congratulations to Chicken Leg Angel and Power Chords. You will each receive a BF1 poster collection, a Frontlines pack and a BFN t-shirt. If you didn't win, hang on for a second because there's more. If you like this video and subscribe to our channel, you'll have a chance to win a Battlefield 1 Dice Edition box, a perfect way to commemorate this Battlefield title ahead of the next release. Finally, if you're part of a clan, platoon or esports organization, don't miss out on the BFNations divisions. We'll be hosting a 5v5 incursions tournament with a total of $3,000 in the prize pool and support Xbox, PC and PS4. The registration deadline here is May 11th, so if you want to participate, head directly to bfnations.com/divisions for full information and sign-up process. That's all. For those of you who made it this far, thanks for your attention and goodbye.